Welcome to the Web Hosting Cat Podcast, brought to you by webhostingcat.com. Here's your host, Michael James.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. Are you a WordPress blogger that wants to start creating your own themes and plugins? WordPress powers about a quarter of the entire web these days, and my guest today is not only one of the foremost experts on WordPress development, but he also has the ideal job at WP Engine, where he gets to, as he puts it, nerd out on WordPress and get paid for it. I'll let him explain to you more about it in the interview. On this edition of the podcast, we talk with Jason Cosper, developer advocate at WP Engine. All right, and today I'm talking with Jason Cosper, the developer advocate at WP Engine. Great company, the company we always recommend for premium managed WordPress hosting services. Jason, welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thank you for having me, Michael. I really appreciate it.
Today I thought we'd talk a little bit about WordPress development.
Okay.
Tell us a little bit about your role as a developer advocate at WP Engine.
It is a pretty great role. What I get to do on a day-in, day-out basis is I get to talk to plugin and theme developers about how their code could work better on our platform and how our platform could work better with their code. So the two kind of go hand in hand. But basically, I get paid all day to talk about WordPress. Like, that is my function, and it's I don't know how I've managed to luck into such a role, but to be able to nerd out about WordPress for my day-to-day thing, it's I'm incredibly fortunate.
Awesome, sounds great. Now, for bloggers that are looking to get started with WordPress development, what would you recommend is the best way to get started?
Honestly, to get started in development, there are a few courses online that are really fantastic, really good places to. At this point, I'm not sure how recent the one is, but Treehouse has a good WordPress development course. I think that they stopped updating it, but it's still recent enough that it's worth checking out if you have a Treehouse account. Know the Code. Not sure if you're familiar with them or not. They have another kind of beginner's development tutorial and other paid ones that are really great, but really just kind of diving in and learning PHP initially, just general PHP, and then kind of diving in and learning plugins or themes, whichever interests you more, and sort of hanging out on the forums, like getting some questions answered. Really joining a community of the Post Status community, which is one I hang out in. They're really great and have a lot of really knowledgeable developers in their heavy dev room. It's just developers sharing tips and tricks all day. And even if you're a beginner developer, there's enough seasoned developers in there that'll help you kind of work through
Okay.
those things.
Is it easier to start out developing themes or plugins, or is it about the same?
Well, I personally, plugins you can develop, I have a plugin that I wrote that is probably 25 lines of code, 30 lines of code. A theme is a little bit more involved. You have to start dealing with multiple files, things like that. But if you just want something to, add, if you look at the Hello Dolly plugin, which comes with every install of WordPress, the whole reason that that's there is so you can get started with WordPress development. So you can, if you want to edit Hello Dolly and turn it into Big Lebowski quotes, or if you want to, something else, like change that around, like you can start experimenting with that, and it's a lot easier to kind of to work through that.
Jason, what are some of the considerations you should keep in mind for responsive design?
Oh man, responsive design. Really, just making sure that you have your image sizes dialed in, making sure that I am all about performance and optimization. So making sure that your images are well tuned, making sure that you're not loading unnecessary JavaScript, especially if you don't necessarily need a page effect at the smaller size that you do on a larger size. Like, if you don't need to include jQuery, then why include jQuery? Have that sort of thing where if something, be mindful and a little more thoughtful about what you need to load at what particular breakpoints and sizes and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now I know one of the things I've heard you speak about before is HHVM and PHP.
Yeah.
I was wondering, now that PHP 7 is out, and I've heard good things about it. Looks good to me. It's worked out good for me anyway. What are your thoughts on HHVM versus PHP 7?
Yeah, I appreciate what HHVM and the team at Facebook has done to make PHP faster. I mean, it's just basically kind of turned into a space race. It's Russia versus the U.S. and Facebook in this case is Russia. Sadly, the Soviet Union, and they have managed to push PHP in such a positive, faster direction that they're worried more about how quickly versions of PHP can run. At this point, I think PHP is the better choice, only because just recently, I'm not sure if you're aware of this or not, they are not running tests on HHVM for new versions of WordPress. So when a new version of WordPress is released, they test on PHP versions back to PHP 5.2. So 5.2, 5.3, 5.4, 5.5, 5.6, and now 7. They were also testing to HHVM. The HHVM test always had a couple little bugs, quirks, failures, and they were like, PHP 7 is good enough. It is fast enough, and it's a little bit of a back and forth. We're not going to bother testing for HHVM anymore. So, really, if the project says, if it's good enough for the WordPress core project, it's good enough for me.
Okay. Now, being able to develop in a local environment is obviously important, and I know you're going to be speaking later about the Valet project.
Yeah.
Can you tell us some of the advantages of using it in a local development?
Yeah, so I really think Valet is exciting. I use a number of different development environments. I use a Vagrant for my local development. So I use Vagrant, I use Docker. It's about using the tool that's right for what you need to do. Valet, when Valet is installed on your system, it is always running in the background. It is running, when it's running just idle, it takes up only 7 megs of RAM. Wow. Now compare that to you load up a Vagrant in the background, half your RAM is gone. And you're working on it, and it's going great, but then all of a sudden you need to hop on a Skype call, or you need to get on a Google Hangout or something to talk with your team. And between Google Hangouts and your Vagrant, all of a sudden, your RAM is just gone, and everything's going into swap and everything else. Valet it's kind of a scratch pad. That's how I see it. It's one of those things where if you need to do something quick and dirty and get it done, Valet is kind of my preferred method for doing it.
That sounds great. Now, like I said, we've recommended WP Engine for a long time to our audience for managed WordPress hosting,
and we appreciate that.
And we've written about transferable installs and some of the features that are great for developers. I just wanted to ask you. Can you talk about some of the features that WP Engine offers that are really cool for WordPress developers?
Yeah, so we have just actually added a way to label your installs, so and kind of categorize them. So effectively, if you're running, say, a single account with 10 or 20 or however many installs you have, you can say, okay, these are, say you manage to mix business and personal, and you have a couple personal sites on your plan where you're reselling or you're hosting for folks. You can actually tag and say, this is my personal version of these are my personal sites. These are, so you can actually look at that. Also, on top of that, the tagging also allows you to label a particular site as a development site, a staging site. We offer staging, but sometimes people want to stage their site in a closer to live environment. Right. The difference between our staging site and our production sites is that production has caching, staging doesn't. If people, oh well, it worked in staging, that's because it doesn't have caching. Sometimes you just need to check just one last little sanity check to make sure that it'll work in production before you actually put it into production. The workflows that we've managed to put out now will let you have that sort of production, an actual like staging style production environment that you can put something into before you roll it out. So that development workflow is, yeah.
Awesome. Okay, and just wrapping up here, I wanted to get your opinion. What does the future look like for WordPress development?
Matt Mullenweg really, a couple years ago at the State of the Word, when he said at WordCamp US, the first WordCamp US, learn JavaScript deeply. Right now there is a big discussion going on around React and Vue. Which do they want to include? I really don't mind which one they do at this point. I see the benefits of both. But because of the REST API, I think that really, and that's the whole reason that they're talking about including or having a priority for one JavaScript framework over the other, is effectively, I think that the more we can do with the REST API and the more that the REST API kind of expands and allows to, so I'll actually, about 2.5 years ago, I was at the first Loop Conf in Las Vegas. And at the exact same time, in the exact same hall, there was also an Angular conference going on, just one room over. And we were talking to these guys, and they were like, what do I need WordPress for? I can develop a CMS in Angular, no problem. And it's like, yes, okay. However, WordPress has been around at that point for like 12 years. WordPress has been around for 12 years. They have pretty much figured out how to do the CMS part, how to do a blog, how to do pages, how to do all of that stuff. Why don't you just write a really awesome Angular app and then give the UX, hand over the whole, okay, you guys go log in to your WordPress thing, do all that, and then after you're done, push it over to the Angular app. And then there's no WordPress on the front end. You don't have to worry about any of that. Like, it's just this secret thing. Don't pay any attention to the man behind the curtain. Here's WordPress. I really think that we're going to run into more and more of that as the years go on. And it's really exciting to see the sort of applications that people are going to manage to build for this. There's a number of apps that are being built on top of, I know that Human Made makes an app for kind of like digital nomads that roam around and they can check in and chat and all this other stuff, and the WordPress is the back end for that. That's amazing. The fact that here's an iOS app, and you install it on your phone. Everything else is, as far as anyone knows, it's just an iOS app. But it's WordPress underneath. That's if you told me 5-10 years ago that WordPress is going to be an iOS app, I'd be like, what, for updating posts on iOS? That sounds cool, I guess. But now it's the possibilities are almost limitless.
Awesome. Cool. Well, this has been very informative, and I really appreciate you taking out the time. Always enjoy listening to you speak at conferences.
Wonderful.
And
thank you, Michael.
Hope we get to talk again sometime soon.
Yeah, I definitely hope so.
Great stuff there from Jason. He mentioned a number of resources during the interview, and we'll post links for you on our website. My thanks again to Jason Cosper for joining us on the program. For more information about WP Engine's WordPress developer features, visit us at webhostingcat.com. That's going to do it for now. As always, I wish you all the very best with your website endeavors. Thanks so much for listening, and take care.
You've been listening to the Web Hosting Cat Podcast, sponsored by webhostingcat.com. The preceding program is copyrighted 2017 by TuxCat Media.